Tablet's still there, clicker's still here. I'd like to call our next panel up. Our next session, Measurement and Data Attribution in the World of Walled Gardens, will be moderated by George Ivie. I'm going to let George introduce his panelists. Looking forward to this session as always.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Hopefully this mic is working. Good afternoon, everybody. We're switching gears a little bit. This panel is not sort of what you've been experiencing so far during the day, talking about the data and personalization and behavioral science and things like that. We are going to have a session to talk about measurement and accountability, transparency, and also things like data attribution and data access, which have been issues in the industry related to large digital platforms. So we have on the stage Alec and Daniel. Alec Berntson from Google, Daniel Slotweiner from Facebook. And I'm with a little organization called the Media Rating Council. We're based in the United States, and we all work together, not together, because we work separately together to do some audits at Facebook and Google. And we had a session last year, if you were at ICOM last year, which really kind of kicked off our discussion of accountability related to the large platforms. The Media Rating Council in the US does audits of organizations that measure media. We've been around about 55 years doing that. We audit companies like Nielsen and ComScore and things like that, which are traditional sort of bread and butter measurement organizations. But about 2 years ago, we started down the path of auditing large digital platforms. And both Google and Facebook, to their credit, have stepped forward and engaged in certain types of auditing. So first, I'm going to take a minute and explain that to you. But the main stars of this show are Daniel and Alec, who we're going to have talk a little bit about the auditing function, ask some questions. I'm actually supposed to find the iPad. I want to remind you that you can submit questions. You might want to ask questions to Facebook and Google, and we'll have some time to take a couple of those. First, to explain a little bit about what we're doing. We are trying to enable third-party measurement of these large digital platforms. Probably unless you've been under a rock, you've read press over the last few years about measurement issues of various types associated with large platforms, certain things about lack of transparency, lack of data access, and we've been executing on a strategy to open the platforms up more to third-party auditing. We're principally focused in 4 areas. The first is industry standard viewable impressions, so measurement of impressions on the platform. They measure impressions themselves, but what we're trying to do is enable a mechanism for third-party verification companies like Mode and IAS and Double Verify and ComScore and stuff like that to measure those impressions independently. And that last word is very important. Not just parrot, for example, what the platforms do, but actually acquire the raw data off the platform, similar to what they would get, for example, if they tagged, and be able to independently calculate viewability. The other thing we want to enable is filtration for invalid traffic and fraud on the platform, something we call sophisticated invalid traffic filtration. So the audits encompass that. And all those audits are going on at both Facebook and Google. They're very, very significant audits. The other two components that we're trying to audit is also brand safety and enablement of third-party audience measurement on the platforms. You're probably aware of third-party audience measurement tools like DAR or VCE that come from ComScore and Nielsen that allow you to measure in an apples-to-apples way across various platforms and media outlets. We're trying to enable that at Facebook and Google in a validated way. So those are the four things we're trying to do: viewable impressions, SIVT, audience measurement, and brand safety. These companies are in various stages of these audits. For example, both have completed the data pipeline necessary to do the viewable impressions and SIVT. Audits of those are now complete and successful. They're very difficult. They took over a year to do at both organizations. So that's the general background. With that, we're going to talk a little bit to Daniel and Alec. So grab a mic. And I guess the first question is maybe just giving you guys an opportunity to comment on the audit, what it's about, the rigor of it, the benefits, what you don't like about it. It's free for all. You can say whatever you want. And maybe give that to the benefit of the audience. And we'll go from there into more details. You want to start, Alec?
Okay, sure.
Alpha order.
Alphabetical. Okay. Hi. So as George mentioned, I'm Alec Berntson. I've worked at Google for a number of years across a wide variety of products, and I look after our general strategy for how we enable these audits and third-party access to data across all our different platforms. So across Google Ads, Campaign Manager, Google Ad Manager, and DV360. And we've conducted audits with the MRC across all four of those platforms. The audits, I think, have been, there's a couple of reasons why we've done this. We believe, first and foremost, that transparency and like demonstrating to advertisers the accuracy of the data that they receive is really important. And we think that the MRC, the way that they set standards is really in alignment with this. There's the standards that we are audited against are based on industry consensus. So it's based on the buy side, the sell side, and the vendors all participating in a fairly like rigorous and open debate about the merits of the standards. And the result is that when we are audited, it is audited against the industry's consensus of what these metrics should be. So we know that then the output of the audits and what we are checked and what other vendors are checked against is going to represent the will of the industry, if you will, and that means that the output will be accepted. Similarly, when we do the audit with the MRC CPAs, which includes on-sites, reviews of source code, running their own end-to-end tests, interviewing lots of staff, a whole like involved process, we know the output from that is then voted on by the members transparently. Everybody gets to see the, I don't know, a couple 100-page reports that come out of these. And as a result, like the accreditation has real weight because it's based on standards developed with consensus, a thorough audit, and then voting that represented, complete and transparent awareness of what happened. So, sorry if that's a little bit long answer, but that's my view on why we've undertaken all this work.
Yeah, thanks, Al.
So I won't. Is this on? So I won't repeat that too much because I think I agree with everything Alex said. I'll just build on it a little bit. For us, the audits have a couple additional benefits. One is they do push us to be consistent across our platforms in a way that sometimes we wouldn't otherwise have been. And so I think it's important that you guys know that these audits actually drive other types of product changes that go beyond some of the direct issues under review. And that's kind of in line with the second point which I make, which is that we're often, in working with the MRC and the auditors, really thinking and being pushed to think about the spirit of the standard as opposed to the specific way it was written. And that's important because in a world where things are evolving so quickly and quite complex, I think the standards are being written with best available information, but when you get into some of the details, you find that a lot of things are different than what they might otherwise have appeared. And so there is an element of collaboration and innovation that happens in these, which is super important.
Thanks, both of you. If you're in the audience here, you might not be from the US. I think it's a very, very international crowd. So you may be sitting there going, well, what does this matter to me? I'm in Germany, or I'm in France, or I'm somewhere else, Spain. So maybe you guys could just take the opportunity to comment on the centralization or the centralized nature of these, or what issues. So we're doing a very comprehensive audit, thousands of hours, testing metrics, verifying them, making sure they're to standard. But what should people outside the US be concerned about? What localization issues should they be considering that may not be covered in our audit, et cetera? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you want to start, Dan?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, F goes before G, right? So a couple things. One is our systems, for the most part, are very centralized. We build for a global platform, and we use the same system in all markets. And so it's very important for us that the audits be. It's going in and out. Okay, so we'll switch back and forth. No talking over each other, I guess. So it's very important that the. I think it's just. Maybe I'm just holding it over the. I think I was holding the infrared or something. Okay, I'll try again. So centralization is super important for us because our systems are global, and we actually think that this is kind of important for the local aspect because it ensures that we have to maintain the high standards that we have in every market for all of the smaller markets. And so, it's actually in many ways a benefit and contributes to the consistency that advertisers want and that we want to drive across the industry. I think there may be some areas where localization is an issue, particularly when you get into some of the content-related issues that we face, where local laws actually imply different things, and that kind of compliance issue is something we need to think about a little bit. Not sure that that's something that should be handled in a one-time audit versus something that has a little more continuous oversight element to it. But for the most part, in terms of our ad system, we think global audits are not just more efficient, but they're actually the benefit and the way you would want to go.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with a tremendous amount of what you just said. Similarly, our systems are highly centralized. So when we build code for viewability or impressions or ad fraud detection, we have a central team, a single team that writes the code, and then they deploy it on data centers across the world. But it's the same code running everywhere that you are. And so the measurement that we gather, the processing of the logs that we do, is all the same everywhere. And so that means that when we do the audits, we don't filter out just to the US. All the audits that we've done to date have looked at the entire scope of our measurement. And even just in terms of localization, take viewability, we have actually published not too long ago a blog on Think with Google where you can look at the YouTube viewability across markets. And we've seen within, I think, plus or minus 2%, the same viewable measurement across every different market that we have worldwide. So it's a very, we see that these types of upper funnel measurement in particular, they just are very consistent globally. Advertisers ask us for consistent measurement to keep things simple and to have apples to apples. And as there is more and more measurement of more and more attributes of a campaign, the desire for simplification and for unification is really strong. And we hear this all the time from our largest customers.
Yeah, I think that's an element of tension that's going to evolve in this audit, is to essentially making sure we're communicating outwardly what's audited, what's been covered by MRC, give people sufficient detail on that, and then let them come to Google and Facebook and other platforms and figure out what localization work they need to do. switching gears a little bit, earlier I mentioned Nielsen and ComScore. So there's a lot of discussion about how do we measure, if like we work with a lot of advertisers at MRC, and many of the advertisers we work with tell us they have two simple questions. They want to know who saw their ad, their reach essentially unduplicated, and they want to be able to manage frequency to those people. Those are two simple asks, and they're very difficult without sharing data or having measurement across platforms. And one of the solutions we're trying to implement is allow or enable cross-platform and cross-media vehicle tools like a DAR or a VCE. I wonder if you guys could comment on that. Is that a solution you see as viable? Is that something you support? Those audits are just nascent at this point. Our audits, I'm not saying your relationship with Nielsen and ComScore, but there may be other products out there. But what do you think about that as an approach to enable cross-media views of your data and others?
So yeah, we've partnered very closely with a number of the audience vendors for quite some time, Nielsen and ComScore. We have deployed in various capacities of mobile and desktop measurement,
doesn't look like it's
both of
working.
those across dozens of markets. So we're actually live with these guys on YouTube and across our different platforms. And as far as I actually think that the capabilities of what are deployed is often in excess of what people think. Like you can actually run the deduplicated reach across both of our platforms today where these things are deployed. And I think a lot of people actually don't realize like the power of that and that's already available like in your normal DAR reports, for example. And I think that our partnership with these vendors is only going to get stronger as time goes on because there's the large pivot towards cross-media measurement. There's nascent standards that are in public comment actually by the MRC, and there's products out there. Nielsen Total Ad Ratings does TV and digital deduplication, and we're actually live with that as well in the U.S. And we hope to expand to more markets, and we hope to bring on more vendors and whatnot. And as George mentioned, like, this sort of measurement is sensitive. It is difficult to do, but I think that we've set a good precedent with how we work with the viewability vendors, and I look forward to following that same path on reach and audience.
So I would just build on, again, for us, third-party partnerships around measurement and research are extremely important. We have, I think, over 40 partnerships with measurement companies today, including the ones you mentioned. And we also see it as a very symbiotic relationship. We are, in a lot of cases, as we'll get into later, I'm sure, third parties need our participation in these systems for them to function, but we also find that we kind of mutually raise the bar on measurement and methodology and push each other. We also find, interestingly enough, that for the advertisers that use third-party measurement tools to measure us, they actually use our first-party tools even more than other advertisers, and because of the global nature of some of our first-party tools versus some of the more local offerings from the third parties, they offer good complements to each other. So we see these systems evolving together, but one without the other is not an option.
Cool. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about brand safety. There's been a lot of news about brand safety. The MRC released a standard on brand safety. And there's also third-party measures of brand safety out there, or that adjudicate brand safety. But what we see is that your platforms, at least looking so far in terms of how we've been exposed, have now developed some very intense controls around brand safety. You're becoming pretty mature. And we all know that's not perfect. There are incidences that are happening. It's hard to get this stuff perfect. I guess maybe just comment a little bit on the brand safety journey, how committed you are to audit that, issues you might see. We see a gap between your capabilities on your platforms and what third-party measures are able to do in terms of the detail, access to the data timely, the machine learning and things that are necessary in the actual content analysis, video analysis, things like that. Maybe you could just spend a minute and express your views about brand safety, accountability, auditing, things like that.
Sure. So a couple things. One, I mean, maintaining the kind of safety of our platform is something that we could not be more focused on or investing more in. I think it's important to note that this is independent of advertising, the advertising industry. We have a ton of effort going into developing and enforcing our community standards, and I think our new community standards report is coming out very soon. So we're committed to transparency around what are the incidents of certain types of content on our platform, how good are we getting at identifying that and removing it, and making that clear. We think that's the basis of our ability to kind of even address brand safety as an issue. When it comes to the advertising kind of framework for brand safety, I don't think it's developed yet. There are examples of where we offer brand safety controls and third parties are part of that effort. They're very good at identifying certain sites and certain types of content that that an advertiser may explicitly want to not be next to. But then there's experiences like our feed experience where content is dynamic, the individual experience with content is unique, and when you think about the scale and the complexity of that, it's pretty hard to imagine a third party being able to operate effectively in terms of identifying content and measuring it and reporting on it. And so we're going to have to figure out how this evolves. In terms of auditing this, I think when there's a specific solution in place, I think we are, it fits into our philosophy around audits in general. If it's for advertisers and there's a solution there, it should be transparent and it should be audited. I think when it comes to our community standards and the algorithms involved in identifying content, it becomes much more difficult to imagine how that would work.
All right, I can talk a little bit from the YouTube perspective. So certainly in the last 18 months, we've taken unprecedented steps in the history of the platform to improve brand safety. Every day we continue to raise the bar, and we've done a tremendous amount of work. There's still a long road ahead to get to where we want to be and where advertisers, where we are promised advertisers is to be. But we're continuously working to have a safe platform for advertising. In terms of let's see, so in terms of our first-party audit status, we've taken a couple of steps over the past 2 years. So about, I think this time 2 years ago, we conducted a very lightweight audit or review of our controls with MRC CPA. Then I believe that's when the standards development work happened on the new brand safety guidelines, and we were an active participant in that. And then once that was ratified, we've since conducted a pre-assessment of the capabilities that went to the MRC committee a few months ago, and now we're working on ramping up for a full-blown audit of our capabilities. So we're definitely very committed on the first-party side to demonstrating our commitment to providing a brand-safe environment. On the third-party side, we also very quickly recognize the need for advertisers to have the same sort of controls that they're used to on other platforms where they advertise, the same vendors. And so we partner closely with in particular IAS and Double Verify to provide brand safety reporting on YouTube. And we've done a number of steps, like provide them with access to the metadata and all the content that's on the page when you see a YouTube video, the video file access and whatnot, to be able to do their own independent measurement. Similarly, if you think about, this is a very hard machine learning problem, and if you have machine learning and you could have better algorithms, or you could have more features, or you could have more training data. Usually you want to pick, given a decent amount of the first two, more training data, especially in a complex space like brand safety, is going to be the really important thing to have. And so we have worked with the third parties where we have kind of this bi-directional feedback loop where they report to us unsafe content that they find that then can go through our human review, and we provide back to them feedback on some of these things so that they can have continuously improving a corpus of training data as well. And so just to recap, we're definitely committed to the MRC audit process, and we've been working closely with third parties to continuously help raise the bar on the measurement that's there. And someday if we want to do audits and accreditation of that, I think again, with viewability, we have a template for how that can work.
That's cool. There's a question here from the audience, which I think is related. How do you decide what third parties you work with in the areas I described, like viewability and SIVT and stuff? As a platform, who do you align with to do business?
I can speak to it a little bit. There's a few factors we look at. Usually, a big factor is market demand. What is the coverage of that particular research company's client base, and then the next one is independence and methodological rigor, call it, or transparency is a better word. So it's very hard for us to work with companies who don't want to open up their methodology and process and subject themselves to some validation. So those are typically the ones. Unfortunately, we also have to have a fairly limited number. It depends on the particular type of space we're talking about, but there are constraints in terms of how many partners we can work with at once, just based on resources, really. There's a couple things where I think, the kind of data environment also require us to be very cautious in terms of how many partnerships we want to do. We are now doing a lot of our own actual independent audits of partners using accounting firms, just like the MRC would. That's something that we think is super important to understand how partners are using data once we are actually in a partnership, and that is revisited from time to time. So these are not, it's not in most cases, flipping a switch to enable a partner. These are very involved, from contract to audits to methodological reviews to execution processes that require a lot of investment.
I don't have a whole lot to offer because you pretty much laid out kind of a very similar strategy that we take. We have like this program called Google Marketing Partners that you can, I think we have a website online which has all the different partners who we work closely with, and we do a very similar thorough vetting process. And actually one other criteria that we typically use is that we want the vendors to be MRC accredited or seeking MRC accreditation or a similar local accreditation in the markets where they operate, so that we can ensure that all the IT controls and the adherence to consistent standards from what we and our clients expect are followed. Yeah.
Cool. There's another question from the audience which takes us, I think, to one of our last subjects, and that has to do with attribution. So there's been a lot of news about, the sort of conflicting nature of privacy and attribution at times, and that has caused limitations on the extent to which platforms are sharing IDs and looking outward to enable attribution that used to exist in the ecosystem. It's becoming much more constrained. So Peter from the audience asks, it's great to see an increase in transparency for viewability, fraud, and brand safety. What are you doing to achieve the same for independent attribution of site visits and conversions across YouTube and Facebook properties? And just for full disclosure, we are in discussions with Google about auditing Ads Data Hub, and one good aspect of that is that an area where you're intending to certify vendors to maybe share additional data? But anyway, I'll let you guys deal with that question. So what are you guys doing to open up attribution, to sort of combat those limits that are out there?
I guess I'll try to answer in 45 seconds so you have time as well.
Well, we'll get the music and then we'll leave.
So we, Yeah, so again, like being transparent is absolutely important for us. We definitely, I think, acknowledge that there's some hard times, as a result of the changes of the privacy landscape and therefore policy changes that we've made across our platforms. It's definitely been hard in the attribution space, and we definitely acknowledge that. But we are definitely, again, committed to transparency here, and we are working really hard. We've actually made considerable investments in Ads Data Hub as our platform, where you essentially have kind of a clean room environment where you can bring in your non-Google data and join it with Google data in a privacy-safe way, and then export kind of your results. So the goal is that you can still create the same sort of output that you would have. It just would be done in a more privacy-safe way. And so that platform is one that we're continually adding to, and that we are inventing new privacy tech, because doing attribution across a variety of sites and whatnot is challenging even in this sort of environment. With YouTube specifically, we're in discussions about how do we audit the exposure of YouTube data within this environment, and then similarly the sort of matching and joining technology that happens there, and that's something we're in active discussion about.
So I just add, we do have an active attribution partnership program, and we have several partners in that space, and we have managed to share the individual level data in a privacy-safe way to enable those. We're also very focused on how do we validate attribution. That's an important question. You see several advertisers recently using 3 different attribution approaches and coming up with 3 different answers. So I think there's a real need here to not just certainly to audit the systems, but to start thinking seriously about validation and how we would set standards for measurement. Attribution is just one place, but lift systems are another, and media mix is even another. And so we'd like to see kind of work being done in that area collectively as well. But figuring out the data sharing issues are paramount. I think there's interesting work going on in sort of how you can share semi-aggregated data. We have this concept of user sets, which doesn't require individual level data, but provides enough variation for some of these exercises. So we need to do more exploration there as well.
Yeah, and this is an area MRC has designs to set standards in with a lot of collaboration from others, but it's a big deal to try to standardize these efforts. And I know Facebook in particular has been challenging us in what metrics are the best metrics to really audit and promote. Should we be more focused on outcome metrics rather than counting metrics? And I feel like we need to do both, but do you guys want to comment on sort of the tension between counting and measuring how effective and sales and ROI impact of ads? It's obviously a critical area.
Yeah, so
Time's up, but go ahead.
You reset the shot clock a second ago, so maybe we'll get more. So I absolutely agree that counting is fundamental, but what we're finding is that certain metrics matter in certain places more than others, and what we want to do is make sure there's a way for advertisers to understand which proxies, because that's what they are in most cases, are the right ones to optimize for. And we think measurement systems are critical to that, but if they're not audited and validated, we don't have the kind of universe we need.
Yeah.
I think one leads to the other, and they both need to be transparent and clear to advertisers.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you guys for listening. Alec and Daniel, thank you very much, and we appreciate your participation. Bye-bye.